Have you ever wondered how close you've come to danger without even realizing it? At Shivering Vault, we take you there, one story at a time. But before you drift off, consider liking this video, commenting where you're watching from and at what time, and subscribing to keep these chilling stories coming. Now, let's dive into these unsettling tales. It was a long, lonely drive down a stretch of highway I knew all too well. Highway 58, cutting through the Mojave Desert in California. I'm Daniel Carter, a long-haul trucker, and I've been driving these roads for over a decade. The Mojave is an unforgiving landscape, vast, desolate, and beautiful in its own strange way. There's something about the emptiness that has always felt peaceful, almost meditative. The arid desert stretches out on all sides, the land seemingly endless, and the only company I ever had were the occasional tumbleweeds rolling across the highway and the distant peaks of mountains on the horizon. During the daytime, the desert was harsh. The sun beat down relentlessly, and the roads shimmered in the heat, making it look like the world itself was melting. But at night, everything changed. The desert's brutal heat faded, and the temperature dropped sharply, creating a dry chill in the air that settled over everything. The world around me became cloaked in darkness. The stars above glittered in the sky like diamonds scattered across black velvet, their light offering some comfort in the otherwise oppressive quiet. The hum of the truck's engine became my only companion, a low, constant sound that seemed to match the rhythm of my thoughts. The silence of the desert at night is a strange kind of peace. It's the kind of quiet that you get used to. It's the kind of silence that fills every crevice of your mind, forcing you to either lose yourself in it or confront the thoughts you've been pushing away. And over the years, I've learned to lose myself in it. I've gotten used to the isolation. You develop a certain kind of relationship with the road when you drive it this much. It becomes familiar, predictable, safe. Or at least that's how it had always seemed, until tonight. It was well past midnight, and I had been driving for hours. The truck's headlights sliced through the dark, casting long beams of light that barely illuminated the edges of the road. I was heading toward Bakersfield, a town far off in the distance where I was supposed to drop off a delivery. It was just another haul, just another night on the road. But tonight felt different. It felt heavier, like something was waiting. I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but the sense of unease was growing with each passing mile. I was trying to make up for lost time. A delay in the previous load had set me back a few hours, and now I was doing my best to catch up. My eyelids were heavy, the pull of sleep almost irresistible, but I couldn't afford to rest. Not yet, not with miles still to go. My hands gripped the wheel a little tighter, and I forced myself to focus, trying to push through the exhaustion that was slowly creeping up on me. The highway ahead stretched out like a black ribbon of emptiness, the occasional curve barely breaking up the monotony. The wind, faint but persistent, whispered through the cracks of the cab, carrying with it a dry scent of sand and sagebrush. There were no other cars, no lights in the distance. Just me and the road. I leaned back slightly in my seat, glancing at the dashboard. The clock showed that it was well past 1 a.m. I'd been driving for nearly 12 hours straight, save for a few brief stops to refuel and grab a quick bite. The truck's engine hummed steadily beneath me, a reminder of the miles I'd already covered. I knew the route by heart, the twists, the turns, the empty stretches of asphalt that seemed to go on forever. There was a certain kind of comfort in that familiarity. But even as I thought this, the feeling of unease hadn't gone away. It clung to me, stubborn and unshakable. As I rounded a slight curve in the road, something caught my eye. At first, I thought it was a trick of the headlights, a shadow perhaps, or a patch of brush that had shifted in the wind. But no. As I drew closer, I could see it more clearly. Someone. A figure standing in the middle of the road. My heart skipped a beat. It wasn't unusual to see hitchhikers along this stretch of highway. The Mojave, despite its isolation, isn't always as empty as it seems. People get stranded out here from time to time, cars break down, or people find themselves wandering off the beaten path, hitching rides to wherever they're trying to go. But this felt different. There was something wrong about it. I instinctively reached for the brakes, my foot slamming down on the pedal. The truck's tires screeched against the asphalt as I fought to bring the massive rig to a stop. The vehicle lurched forward before the brakes caught, and I felt the truck slowing rapidly, the heavy cargo behind me shifting slightly. I barely avoided hitting the figure in the road. The woman was standing there, just feet away from the front of my truck. I couldn't tell much about her at first, just that she was wearing tattered clothes, her arms wrapped tightly around herself as if she were trying to shield herself from something. I didn't know what. She was barefoot, her feet dirty and cracked like she had been walking for miles, but there was no sign of a vehicle nearby. Nothing to explain how she got out here in the middle of nowhere, with the nearest town miles away. The headlights from my truck illuminated her in a harsh, unflattering light. Her hair was wild and unkempt, falling in disarray over her face. She didn't move as I came to a stop, standing perfectly still as though waiting for something, or someone. For a moment I just sat there, staring at her. I could feel my heart racing, an unfamiliar sensation of discomfort gnawing at my insides. There was no logical reason for it. I had seen my fair share of hitchhikers in my time. Hell, I've picked up a few myself in the past, but something about her presence was unsettling. There was an air about her, an aura of desperation, or maybe something darker that I couldn't place. For a long moment, neither of us moved. The only sound was the hum of the engine and the faint rustle of wind outside the cab. I thought about rolling down the window and asking if she needed help, maybe offering a ride to the nearest gas station or town, but something held me back. My instincts were screaming at me to keep the window up, to lock the doors, to drive away as fast as I could. But I couldn't just leave her there, could I? I didn't know what she was doing out there. Maybe she was lost. Maybe she needed help. I cleared my throat, trying to steady my voice. "Are you okay?" I called out. My voice sounded weak in the stillness, almost foreign to me. I couldn't remember the last time I'd spoken in the desert at this hour. The silence had been so complete that it felt wrong to break it. She didn't respond at first. Her head tilted slightly to one side, as if she were considering my question, or perhaps she hadn't heard me. My stomach twisted uneasily as I shifted in my seat, glancing at the side mirrors for any sign of other vehicles. But there was nothing. Just me, the truck, and this strange woman standing in the road. And then slowly she raised her head, looking directly into my eyes. It wasn't just her gaze that sent a chill down my spine. It was the way she looked at me, eyes wide, unblinking, almost too wide. Her pupils were dilated, her expression vacant, as if she were staring at something just beyond me, something I couldn't see. Something that made me feel like an intruder in this strange, quiet world. For a few seconds, I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. My mind raced, trying to make sense of what was happening, but everything in me was screaming that something wasn't right. Then, to my horror, she smiled. But it wasn't a smile. Not the kind of smile you give when you're relieved, or happy, or grateful. No, it was something far darker. Her lips stretched unnaturally wide, as though her mouth was too small to contain the grin. It wasn't a welcoming gesture. It was predatory. I felt a shiver crawl down my spine as my hands tightened on the wheel. My instincts were telling me to turn the truck around and get out of there. Fast. But I was paralyzed, unable to tear my eyes away from hers. And then she did something that made everything worse. She whistled. It wasn't a casual whistle, the kind you might use to pass the time or signal someone. No, this was sharp. It was unnatural. It cut through the silence of the desert with a piercing shriek that seemed to hang in the air long after it faded. It echoed, vibrating against the walls of my mind. A sudden coldness swept over me, making the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. My breath caught in my throat, and my heart thudded violently in my chest. Something was terribly wrong. I was about to roll up the window to slam the truck into gear and drive away when I heard it, the sound of heavy footsteps, fast and deliberate, coming from the dark expanse of the desert. My pulse skipped, and that's when the real nightmare began. The footsteps were growing louder, fast, almost too fast, and for a brief moment my mind couldn't fully comprehend what was happening. It was as if the entire desert had come alive. My heart hammered in my chest, the fear crawling up my spine like a cold, unseen hand. I could see shadows moving in the periphery, shapes flickering in the dark like they were drawn from the very earth itself. My eyes darted to the side of the road, to the darkness beyond the headlights, and that's when I saw them. Two figures tall and cloaked in shadow, emerging from the edge of the highway. At first, I thought they were just part of my fear, a product of my mind working overtime. But no, as they stepped forward, they were unmistakable. Men, big, muscular, their movements calculated like predators closing in on their prey. They were moving toward the truck with unnerving speed, and something about their gait, their deliberate, purposeful steps, made every cell in my body scream to run, to get away, to flee. One of the men was holding something, a crowbar, the other, a hunting knife, gleaming faintly in the pale light of my truck's headlights. Both weapons looked out of place in the middle of nowhere. Out of place and ominous. I couldn't see their faces clearly, but I could make out the cold set of their bodies, the way they walked like they owned the night, like they had planned this for a long time. Panic surged through me. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to lock the doors, to get the truck in gear and drive the hell out of there. But fear froze me in place. I didn't know what they wanted, but I knew I didn't want to find out. I glanced at the rearview mirror, expecting to see a third figure, maybe more, but I couldn't see anything in the mirror except the darkness of the road stretching back. No vehicles, no lights, just endless emptiness. My truck felt like the only thing in the world, but even that was no guarantee of safety. Then, just as the men reached the side of the truck, one of them, tall, broad-shouldered, and wearing a dark jacket, pulled at the door handle. My pulse spiked, and for a moment I was paralyzed. I felt like a deer caught in the headlights, my mind screaming at me to act, but my body felt heavy, like it was being dragged underwater. It was the sound of his hand slamming against the door handle, shaking it violently, that snapped me out of my paralysis. A jolt of adrenaline shot through my body. I reacted on pure instinct. I slammed the door shut, my hands shaking as I fumbled to lock the cab's door. His hand made contact with the window at the exact moment the truck's engine roared to life. It was like a slow-motion moment, a collision between terror and desperate action. His hand hit the window with a sickening thud, the noise reverberating in my ears as the glass rattled against the frame. I couldn't think. I didn't even process what was happening until my foot hit the gas pedal. The truck lurched forward, tires screaming as they fought to gain traction on the dark asphalt. The engine roared, its sound filling my ears like a burst of chaotic noise cutting through the terror. My hands clung to the wheel, knuckles white, as I fought to keep control of the massive rig. I barely even noticed the man with the crowbar swinging it toward the side of my truck, the metallic clang of metal against metal ringing out like an explosion in the night. The side mirror shattered instantly. I didn't even see it break. It happened too fast. But the sound of the glass shattering, of the impact, it seared itself into my mind. The pieces of the mirror flew in every direction, some of them hitting the side of the truck with soft thuds as I sped away. But I didn't look back. I couldn't. I didn't dare to take my eyes off the road. I slammed the accelerator down further, pushing the truck faster, harder. the engine growling beneath me like an angry beast. The truck surged forward, the rubber of the tires gripping the road with a desperation that matched my own. I knew they were still behind me. I could feel them, like shadows chasing me in the dark. I glanced in the side mirror, half expecting to see one of them gaining on me. But the darkness swallowed up everything in the rear view. There was no sign of the men, no sign of the woman, not even the wrecked mirror. Just the blur of black stretching out into nothingness behind me. But that didn't comfort me. I couldn't explain it, but there was something wrong. The night seemed to press in on me, thicker now, like it was consuming everything around me. The moon barely lit the road, and the darkness on either side of me felt suffocating. The night wasn't just dark. It was oppressive, almost alive, as if the desert itself was a breathing entity, watching me, waiting. Every mile I covered seemed like an eternity. The highway stretched on endlessly, a black ribbon of asphalt cutting through the vast, empty expanse of the desert. I don't even remember how long I kept my foot pressed down on the accelerator, the truck's engine roaring as it surged forward. I just know that I couldn't stop. I couldn't afford to slow down. My eyes flicked constantly to the rearview mirror, hoping, praying that I wouldn't see the flicker of headlights behind me. But the emptiness stayed behind me, undisturbed. I finally broke through the haze of panic long enough to see a gas station up ahead, the faint glow of its lights piercing the night. It seemed like an oasis, like a lifeline in the middle of the desert. My breath was ragged, my heart pounding in my chest like a drum, and my hands were slick with sweat. But I knew I had to get to that station. I had to stop. My body was screaming for rest. My mind was reeling from everything that had just happened. But most of all, I just needed to feel safe. And for some reason, that gas station, small and flickering as it was, felt like the only safe place in the world. I steered the truck into the gas station, the gravel crunching under the tires as I pulled to a stop by the pumps. The light above the station flickered erratically, casting shadows that seemed to dance around me, distorting reality. I sat there for a moment, hands still gripping the steering wheel, breathing heavily, trying to regain my composure. My mind was racing. What had just happened? Was it a robbery gone wrong? Some kind of sick game? I couldn't make sense of it. My eyes darted to the surrounding desert, expecting to see someone, anyone, lurking in the dark. But there was nothing. The station was still, silent, empty. I killed the engine, but the sound of my own heartbeat seemed too loud. It was the only sound in the world, a reminder of the terror I had just escaped. I sat there for a few moments, not moving, trying to gather my thoughts. My hands were shaking so badly that I couldn't seem to pry them off the wheel. My heart was still hammering in my chest, and I felt like I was suffocating, like the air around me had grown thicker, heavier. The silence of the gas station, with its flickering light and the quiet hum of the world turning, felt like it was closing in on me. I forced myself to exhale slowly, trying to steady my breathing. My eyes darted to the gas station attendant's booth. A young guy, maybe in his 20s, was leaning against the counter, looking at his phone. He didn't seem to notice me at first, but when I opened the truck door and stepped out, he looked up, his gaze briefly meeting mine. He raised an eyebrow at the state I was in. I probably looked like a wreck, sweat slicked on my forehead, eyes wide, face pale. I wasn't sure what kind of mess I looked like, but I felt like I had just survived something I couldn't explain. Something wrong. Something that shouldn't have happened in a place like this. "You okay?" the attendant asked, his voice a bit hesitant, like he wasn't sure whether to approach me or stay behind the counter. I swallowed hard, my throat dry, and nodded. "Yeah, just need a coffee." He eyed me for a moment longer, probably wondering if he should call someone, but then he simply nodded and went back to his phone. I wasn't in the mood to make conversation. I didn't want to hear any more about the desert. I didn't want to talk about what had just happened. I just wanted to shake the feeling of it off, as though walking away from it would somehow make it disappear. I made my way to the counter, still feeling like I was moving through a dream. The world seemed a little off kilter, like everything had been tipped just slightly out of place, and I couldn't get back to normal. The attendant gave me a strange look as I paid for the coffee, his eyes flickering down to my trembling hands. I didn't care. I just needed the warmth, the familiarity of something simple. I wrapped my hands around the cup, letting the heat soak into my skin as I took a deep breath. I walked out of the station and back to my truck, the world feeling different now. Heavier, darker, more oppressive. I climbed into the driver's seat, started the engine, and pulled away. The truck rumbled to life, and as I pulled back onto the road, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was following me. I drove for hours, my eyes never leaving the road, my thoughts swirling with everything that had happened. The woman, the men. I didn't know what was real anymore. Was it a trap, or was there something truly sinister at play, something I couldn't explain? I didn't know. But what I did know was that I would never, ever take that stretch of highway again. My name is Mike Delaney, and I've been a long-haul trucker for over 15 years. I've driven coast to coast, across countless highways, winding my way through every kind of landscape imaginable. Endless desert stretches, towering mountain passes, and bustling cities. There's a rhythm to this life, one that becomes second nature after years of solitude. At first, it's the wide open spaces that make the job feel almost liberating. But over time, that same solitude becomes a companion. The hum of the engine, the rhythmic sound of the tires rolling over pavement, the gentle sway of the rig, and the solitude that blankets you as the miles slip by, these things become comforting. But it's not just the quiet that draws me in. There's something magnetic about the highways themselves, the endless road, the endless possibility. You never quite know who you'll meet or what's around the next bend, and sometimes the road holds secrets you'd rather not uncover. That was never truer than one cold, desolate night in California when I found myself facing something I couldn't explain. It was well past midnight, the kind of hour when even the road seems to fall asleep. The air outside my truck felt like it had frozen, yet the coldness had that biting quality, as though it had been waiting for the perfect moment to strike. I had been driving for what felt like days, the miles stacking up behind me as I coasted down I-5, that endless stretch of highway that cuts through California. There was nothing around for miles, just farmland and small, sleepy towns that seemed to have surrendered to the night. The highway, though busy during the day, was empty now. The usual cacophony of passing cars had died down, and it was just me, the open road, and the pale light of the stars above. I was feeling the weight of the journey on my shoulders. It had been a long haul from Oregon, and I wasn't quite ready to call it a night. I could have pushed on through, but there's a limit to how much a person can take, no matter how seasoned a driver they are. I could feel the exhaustion in my bones. My eyes were heavy, and my mind wasn't as sharp as I'd like, so I decided to pull off and take a break. A quick stop for fuel, stretch my legs, grab a snack, and get back on the road. The gas station I pulled into was about as desolate as the highway itself. It wasn't the kind of place you'd even remember passing. The pavement was cracked, the lights above buzzed faintly, casting a sickly, flickering glow on the empty lot. The neon sign buzzed, a low, annoying hum in the silence of the night. There were no other cars, and the lot seemed to be holding its breath, waiting for something. I parked my rig near the pumps and stepped out, the cold air slapping me awake as soon as I opened the door. The sound of the door shutting behind me echoed in the otherwise silent night. I glanced over at the small building that housed the cashier. She was sitting hunched over the counter, staring at a TV screen that looked like it was only half functioning. Her face was vacant, expressionless, like she was miles away from the reality of the moment. She barely glanced up when I approached the pump, her attention wholly absorbed by whatever was on that screen. The place had that tired, rundown vibe to it, one of those stations you only stop at when you absolutely have to. I didn't care about the station's state of disrepair, though. I was too tired to be picky. I just wanted to refuel and get back on the road. I grabbed the nozzle and started pumping the fuel, the cold air biting into my skin as I waited. The quiet was unsettling, though, in a way I couldn't quite put my finger on. This wasn't a peaceful stillness. It felt wrong, empty. I scanned the area once more. The only movement was the flickering of the lights above. It was as though the world around me had frozen. No cars, no sounds, just the whisper of wind through the trees and the dull hum of the gas station lights. It was the kind of place you'd expect to see a tumbleweed roll through, but there wasn't even that. As I finished pumping, I caught sight of two men standing at the back of my trailer, their attention fixed on their phones. They looked out of place in a way I couldn't immediately explain. They didn't seem like they belonged there, their movements stiff and unnatural. They weren't just standing there. They were positioning themselves, watching the area, calculating their next move. They didn't even look up as I approached. It was as if they were trying to blend into the night, to be invisible. At first, I tried to dismiss the feeling creeping up my spine. Maybe they were just waiting for someone. Maybe they were killing time in the same way I was. But something about the way they stood there, rigid and unmoving, set my instincts on high alert. It was too deliberate, too focused. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. I finished with the pump and set the nozzle back in place, but I couldn't stop glancing back at them. They hadn't moved. They just stood there, watching. Their heads didn't turn, their eyes didn't lift from their phones. It was as if they were waiting for something, waiting for me. I turned toward my truck, hoping to put some distance between myself and whatever was happening. The sound of my boots crunching on the gravel was the only noise as I walked. My pulse had quickened, my skin prickling with the awareness that something was wrong. The truck felt like my safe haven, but the men were still there, standing motionless behind my rig. It wasn't until I reached the driver's side door that I heard one of them mutter something under his breath, just loud enough for me to catch it. "He's heading this way." My heart skipped a beat. The words sent a chill through my bones. Something inside me snapped into alert mode, and without thinking, I whipped around and started walking faster toward the door. I knew deep down that I had to move. I wasn't about to let these guys get the upper hand. And then they moved. The first man lunged at me, grabbing my jacket sleeve with a vice-like grip. His fingers were cold, his breath coming in quick bursts. It was fast, too fast. My instincts barely had time to register what was happening. But I had been on the road long enough to know when danger was near. I reacted without thinking. My elbow swung back, catching him square in the chest, sending him stumbling back into the side of the trailer. As he staggered, I pivoted and slammed my foot into the second guy's knee, feeling a sickening crack as his leg buckled under the impact. I didn't wait to see what happened next. I bolted for the truck door, my legs moving on their own, adrenaline flooding my body. I reached the door, slammed it shut, and locked it in one fluid motion. My heart was pounding in my chest, and I was breathing heavily, my hands shaking as I gripped the steering wheel, staring through the side mirror. The two men didn't follow. They didn't shout or run after me. They just vanished, fading into the darkness like they'd never been there. I sat there for a moment, my mind racing, trying to process the surreal sequence of events. What the hell had just happened? Who were they? What did they want? Why had they targeted me? But the answers weren't coming. Only more questions and more fear. I didn't stick around to find out. I slammed the truck into gear and sped away, my hands still shaking on the wheel. The road stretched out before me, empty and cold, but even as the miles passed, the unease didn't fade. I kept glancing in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see headlights trailing me, but there was nothing, just the dark, endless highway behind me. An hour passed, my mind still racing, the fear a constant companion in the truck's quiet cabin. That's when I saw it, the flicker of lights from a highway patrol station off to the right. It was small, the building bathed in harsh fluorescent lights, but the presence of other people, of authority, felt like a relief. Without a second thought, I pulled into the lot and parked my rig. I sat there for a moment, trying to calm myself. I didn't know if I was more scared of what had just happened or what might still happen. The reality of the situation was sinking in. I wasn't just dealing with a random attack. This was something planned. These men knew what they were doing, and they'd been waiting for me. I walked inside the patrol station, and the warm air hit me like a comfort I didn't know I needed. 2 officers looked up as I entered, one of them a grizzled veteran with a face full of stories, and the other a younger guy, probably in his 20s, with eyes that spoke of sleepless nights. "What can we do for you, sir?" the older officer asked. I took a deep breath, still trembling. My voice came out a little shaky. I was just at a gas station up the road. There were 2 guys. They tried to grab me. I don't know what they wanted, but I don't think it was good. I barely got away. The younger officer's face immediately hardened, and the older officer exchanged a glance with him. "Tell us exactly what happened," the older one said, his voice calm, but the tension in his eyes was clear. I repeated the whole story, the way I had filled up the truck, the men loitering near the back of my trailer, how I had noticed them too late, how they had lunged at me, and how I had barely gotten away. I told them everything. As I spoke, I watched their faces, trying to gauge their reactions. The younger officer glanced at the older one, then pulled out a manila folder from a drawer. He slid it across the desk, and I could see a stack of papers inside. Some of the papers were marked with red stamps, missing, and there were photos of trucks, rigs, and faces of truckers. Some of them were familiar, and others I had never seen before, but the one thing they all had in common was that they had gone missing. The older officer took the folder and opened it, flipping through the papers slowly. He stopped on one photo and pointed to it. "This is one of the drivers who disappeared a couple of weeks ago," he said, his voice grim. "Found his truck abandoned, no signs of struggle, just like the others." I felt a cold knot in my stomach. "That's not all," the officer continued. "The thing is, these encounters are happening all over the state. Truckers are being ambushed, especially at isolated places like gas stations or rest stops." The younger officer leaned forward, his voice low but urgent. "We think it's the work of a group, men who target truckers. They wait for them at these isolated gas stations and rest stops, set up ambushes, force the drivers to drive to a remote location, and then, well, we're not entirely sure what happens after that, but it's not good." I swallowed hard. A chill ran down my spine. I had come so close to becoming one of those missing truckers. The older officer nodded, his face grim. "We've been investigating these cases for a while, but so far we haven't had any luck catching them. These men are careful. They know how to stay hidden." I felt the weight of the realization hit me like a ton of bricks. This wasn't just some random attack. This was part of something bigger, something much more dangerous. And I had barely escaped being another name on their list. The officers exchanged another look, and then the younger officer slid the folder back into the drawer. "If you're heading out again, be careful. We'll keep an eye out for any more reports. But don't let your guard down. These men are getting smarter." I left the highway patrol station feeling like my whole world had shifted. I had come in hoping for reassurance, a sense of safety, but all I got was more questions, more dread. Those men, those attackers, weren't just random criminals. They were part of something more organized, something darker, and they were still out there, watching, waiting for the next unsuspecting target. It was a regular late night for me, the kind of night that blended into every other night I've spent driving alone on the endless stretches of highway that cut through the California desert. The kind of quiet that made the night feel like it was swallowing me whole. The hum of the engine, the flickering of the dashboard lights, the occasional crackle of the radio, these were my companions as I pushed my big rig through the barren landscape. The road between Bishop and Lone Pine was a familiar one, a stretch of desert highway I had driven countless times over the years. I had it all memorized: the gentle curves, the long straightaways, the occasional rest stop hidden among the barren hills. I could drive it in my sleep, practically. Still, there was something unsettling about this route at night, especially after the sun dipped below the horizon. The silence seemed to stretch on endlessly, broken only by the low rumble of my truck's engine. You could drive for miles without seeing another vehicle, without a single light to break up the black void surrounding you. It's like the night itself was a living thing, a vast, suffocating presence that swallowed everything in its path. I had grown used to it, though. The solitude, the desolate landscape, it was a part of my life now. There were days when I would long for the noise and bustle of a city, but then, in the middle of the night, in these moments of silence, I would find peace. There's a kind of tranquility in the isolation of the highway. You can think or not think, just let your mind wander while the miles slip by. That night, however, something felt different. The air was colder than usual, and the desert wind seemed to carry an odd kind of tension with it. I couldn't put my finger on it, but there was a heaviness in the air that made the quiet feel less soothing and more oppressive. The truck's headlights cut through the darkness like twin beams of light in an endless sea of black, illuminating only a few feet in front of me, the rest disappearing into the void. I adjusted my grip on the wheel, letting my eyes flit across the road, staying alert. The road was empty, just the way I liked it. No cars, no headlights, just the endless stretch of asphalt winding through the desert. The kind of isolation that felt like you were the only person left on Earth. It's around 3 a.m. when I notice something unusual. At first, it's just a flicker, a faint glimmer in the distance. As I get closer, I see it more clearly. A car, pulled over on the side of the road. It's barely visible at first, almost like a shadow, but the flashing hazard lights catch my attention. The soft orange glow flickers sporadically, casting eerie shadows against the darkness of the desert. It's so isolated out here. No lights for miles. I can't remember the last time I'd seen another vehicle on this road. A quick glance at the rearview mirror reveals more. The flashing hazard lights, a car pulled off to the shoulder, its headlights dimmed. A familiar sight, yet something about this particular instance doesn't sit right with me. I've been down this road 100 times and I've seen my fair share of stranded vehicles. Broken down cars, flat tires, overheated engines. Usually someone's either waiting for a tow or trying to flag down help. The highway patrol usually comes through, or sometimes other drivers stop to offer assistance. But the deeper I get into this road, the more isolated it feels. And tonight, I can't shake the feeling that something is off. I don't stop immediately. As I approach the car, I try to figure out what might be wrong. From what I can see, there's no one else around. No other cars, no sign of distress. Just this lone vehicle flickering its hazard lights. For a brief moment, I consider just passing it by. After all, it's not like I haven't seen this before. In fact, I've learned over the years to keep my distance from stopped cars on roads like this. The desert can be a dangerous place. I've heard the stories, people stranded out here only to find themselves in worse situations. I'd heard the warnings. Never stop for anyone on the side of the road in the middle of nowhere. The advice always stuck with me, even if it felt cruel to follow it. But something keeps pulling my gaze back to the car. As I draw closer, I see it more clearly. A man standing beside the vehicle. He's just standing there beside the car, motioning for me to slow down. He's alone, it seems. He doesn't appear injured, doesn't seem to be in any kind of obvious distress, at least not at first. But as my truck gets closer, I can see his hand rising and falling. He's waving at me. There's no mistaking it. He's trying to get my attention. For a moment, I just keep my foot on the accelerator, trying to ignore him. I tell myself that I've got enough experience to know what to do in situations like this. Keep driving. Keep going. No need to stop. I've heard the stories. I've seen the reports about hitchhikers or stranded drivers who aren't really stranded at all. But the thing is, in all my years on the road, I've never just left someone behind. It's not in me. So against that voice in my head telling me to drive away, I ease my foot off the gas and begin to slow down, my truck humming in the quiet of the desert night. The headlights sweep over the figure again, and I get a better look at him. He's thin, almost gaunt. His clothes are faded, dark jeans and a jacket that looks like it's seen better days. His face is pale, almost sickly, illuminated by the dull light of his car's hazard lights. He keeps glancing over his shoulder like he's afraid someone is following him. His movements are jerky, anxious. I can't quite explain it, but there's something unsettling in the way he moves. His eyes keep darting nervously to the horizon like he's expecting someone to appear. It makes me uneasy. Still, I keep going, a part of me hoping he's just an unfortunate soul whose car broke down and is waiting for help. The other part of me, however, knows better. I know how these isolated roads can be, how vulnerable a person can feel out here in the middle of nowhere with no one else for miles. I've heard enough stories to understand that things like this don't always end well. I'm already preparing my exit strategy in my head when the man waves again. This time, more urgently, more frantically. Something in his expression shifts. A sudden sense of fear, of panic, makes my gut tighten. It's not just a wave anymore. He's desperate. That's when I make my decision. Against my better judgment, I pull over. The truck's engine idles softly, the vibrations humming through the floorboards as I roll down the window. The cool desert air rushes in, carrying with it a faint scent of sagebrush and dust. I can hear the wind howling in the distance, carrying a dry, unsettling whistle through the desert. It's too quiet. The man approaches slowly, his footsteps soft on the gravel, but they seem to echo in the otherwise silent night. He's getting closer, and my senses are on high alert. His clothes are worn and tattered, but his demeanor is anything but casual. There's something in his eyes, an urgency, a fear that's almost palpable. The more I look at him, the more I can't shake the feeling that I'm not the one who's supposed to be helping him. He's within arm's reach now. His face is drawn and pale, the kind of look you get when you haven't eaten or slept in days. His hair is unkempt, and there's a sheen of sweat on his forehead despite the cool desert air. But it's his eyes, those wide, darting eyes, that make me pause. He keeps glancing over his shoulder, his movements jerky, almost like he's afraid of something or someone. It doesn't take much to figure out that whatever is going on with him, it's not just about a broken down car. Something feels off. You got a phone? His voice shakes as he speaks, cracking with what sounds like fear. He looks at me with an intensity that makes my skin crawl. My car broke down. I need to call someone. I'm trying to read him, trying to make sense of what's going on. Part of me wants to tell him to wait for a tow truck or the highway patrol, but then again, he might be in real trouble. It could be an emergency. I can't leave someone stranded out here, not when the desert's this dangerous at night. But as I search his face, I notice how he's still scanning the horizon, like he's looking for someone. His eyes flicker back to me for just a moment, but it's enough for me to see the panic. It's almost as if he's expecting someone to show up, someone dangerous, and I get that gut feeling again. That feeling you get when something's just not right. I hesitate, unsure of how to proceed. I've been down this road so many times before, but never like this. Never with the feeling that I'm being pulled into something I don't understand. I open the glove compartment and pull out my phone. It's a fleeting decision. I offer it to him. Here, you can use mine, but you should be careful out here. It's a long way to the nearest town. His hand shakes as he reaches for the phone, but he doesn't take it immediately. For a brief second, he just stares at it, his breath shallow, and then his gaze darts to the rearview mirror. He checks over his shoulder again, as though he's expecting something, or someone. His lips move as if he's about to say something, but before the words can come, I hear it. Movement. Behind me. I turn my head slightly, just enough to catch it in the corner of my eye. The first thing I see is a dark shape, a figure emerging from the blackness of the desert. At first, I think it's just the wind playing tricks with my eyes. Maybe it's a shadow, or maybe it's another car. But no. I blink and look again, and there are two more figures following the first. They're coming too fast, too quickly. In that moment, everything clicks. My mind races, trying to process what I'm seeing. The figures are tall, their movements too swift to be natural, like they're gliding across the ground rather than walking. My heart skips a beat, and I realize I've made a terrible mistake. The man, the one I thought I was helping, isn't desperate for help at all. He's the distraction. He's the bait. Before I can even react, one of the figures is at the side of my truck, slamming into the door. I hear the crunch of gravel as another steps up behind me. Panic surges through my body like a bolt of electricity. My mind screams at me to move, but my body is frozen. I don't know what to do. Then I hear it. The sound of metal scraping against metal. One of the attackers is trying to open the door. My heart slams against my chest, my hands instinctively clutching the wheel, the grip tight and sweaty. I press the lock button on the door, my thumbs slipping from the pressure. The handle jerks violently again, but it doesn't give. Thank God the door is locked. I don't think. I don't have time to think. Another figure is by my side now. I catch a glimpse of something in his hand, a crowbar, gleaming in the dim light. My pulse surges. The man with the crowbar swings it with a deadly precision. It's like he's done this before, like he's practiced it. The metal clangs against the truck with a sickening thud, and I feel the force vibrate through the cab. My entire body tenses as I jerk backward in my seat, instinctively trying to shield myself from the blow. The crowbar misses my head by inches, but I can feel the rush of wind as it slices past me. Then, it happens. A rock, large and sharp, smashes through the side window, sending shards of glass flying across my lap, cutting my hand as I instinctively shield myself. The third figure is already reaching for something. A knife? A gun? I don't know, but I can't wait to find out. Adrenaline spikes through me like a shock, and everything in my body kicks into overdrive. Without thinking, I slam the truck into gear. My foot hits the gas pedal with all the force I can muster. The truck lurches forward with a loud screech of tires, and I can feel the jolt of movement in my chest as the engine roars to life. The truck jerks, picking up speed instantly, and I can hear the sound of something, a person, hitting the ground behind me. I don't dare look back. I can't afford to. I slam the accelerator to the floor, the truck surging forward, the headlights slicing through the darkness ahead of me. The engine growls louder as I push the truck faster, the tires screeching against the asphalt as I tear down the highway. Everything feels like it's moving in slow motion, the road blurring as I hurtle down it, my hands trembling on the wheel. But I can't stop. I won't stop. I can't shake the image of those figures in my mind. I have no idea if I hit any of them, or if I even ran over anyone. But I don't care. I'm not sticking around to find out. I focus only on the road, praying that I'm not being followed praying that I've escaped whatever nightmare I've just stumbled into. I don't know how long I've been driving. Time feels warped now, like I'm floating in some strange limbo where nothing matters but the road beneath my tires. The truck's engine hums steadily, but everything else feels surreal, as though I'm moving through a dream, or maybe a nightmare. I keep my eyes locked on the road, gripping the steering wheel so hard that my knuckles are turning white. My thoughts race. I replay the entire incident over and over in my head, trying to make sense of it. What the hell just happened? Who were those people? Why were they out there? The questions swirl in my mind, but none of the answers make any sense. My gut tells me I narrowly escaped something terrible, but the thought doesn't offer me any comfort. I feel more like a rat running from a trap, and I can't shake the feeling that I'm not out of danger yet. Finally, in the distance, I see the faint glow of lights. It's the gas station. The one I've passed 100 times, a little oasis in the desert that has always been a welcome sight. This time, it feels like salvation. The relief that floods me is almost overwhelming, and my throat tightens. I pull into the gas station, the truck rattling with each bump in the pavement. The engine sputters, and I ease it to a stop, barely able to focus. I don't even care about parking properly. I just need to get out of the truck, to stretch my legs, to be somewhere that feels safe, even if only for a moment. I'm shaking too hard to grab the keys. I force myself to take a deep breath, to steady my hands before finally turning off the engine. The quiet that follows is deafening. I sit there for a moment, letting the darkness press in around me. I reach for my phone, my fingers clumsy as I dial 911. The phone feels foreign in my hand, like it's not mine anymore. I'm not sure how much time has passed since the attack, but I know I need to tell someone what happened. I need to make sure they understand. My fingers tremble as I press the numbers, each beep feeling like an eternity. The dispatcher answers on the third ring, her voice calm but sharp. 911, what's your emergency? I don't know where to start. My voice cracks as I try to explain, but the words are all jumbled. I keep thinking about the figures in the desert, about the man who tricked me into stopping. My hands are shaking so badly I can barely hold the phone to my ear. Hello, the dispatcher asks, her voice more insistent now. Sir, can you hear me? What's going on? Where are you? I take a deep breath, trying to steady myself. I know I need to focus. I was just attacked on the highway between Bishop and Lone Pine. Someone tried to pull me out of my truck, but my voice breaks and I pause, trying to regain my composure. I think they were trying to rob me. There were 3 of them. One had a crowbar, another had a knife. I don't know what happened to them, but I got away. Please, I need help. The dispatcher is calm and reassuring. Stay on the line. We've got help on the way. Are you injured? I look down at my hands, still stinging from the broken glass. I didn't even realize how badly I was hurt until now, but there's blood on my palms where I tried to shield myself from the glass. My heart races again, but I force myself to answer. I'm okay, just shaken. I need help. Please. I'm not sure how long I wait. The time stretches on, unbearable. My mind keeps replaying the scene. Those figures moving so fast, the man waving me down, the crowbar smashing through my window. It feels like a bad dream. My palms are slick with sweat, my legs restless as I shift in the seat. Finally, after what feels like an eternity, I see the headlights of a sheriff's car coming down the road. Relief floods through me, but it's mixed with a sense of dread. I'm not sure what I expect from the officers. I'm not sure I even believe what happened. Will they believe me? Will they think I'm just another scared trucker with a wild imagination? The sheriff's car pulls into the station, the headlights briefly blinding me. 2 officers get out. Both are older men, their movements slow and deliberate. They walk up to my truck, and I can already see the skepticism in their eyes as they approach. But I don't have the energy to care. I just need to get through this. I roll down the window, and one of the officers leans in, his face hard and serious. "What happened, sir?" I take a deep breath, trying to steady myself. The words spill out of me in a jumble. I was just on the highway, between Bishop and Lone Pine. There was a car pulled over. I stopped to help, but it was a setup. They attacked me. 3 people, one with a crowbar, another with a knife, the other, I don't know. I got away. I don't know where they went. They take down my statement, ask me 100 questions, but I'm still shaking too hard to remember everything clearly. They assure me they'll look into it, but I can't shake the feeling that it's all too little, too late. They check the area, follow the tire marks, and comb through the scene for clues. They find the broken glass, the footprints, and the marks left by my truck, but there's nothing else. But they were long gone. They say they'll increase patrols around the area, share the info with other departments, but honestly, it doesn't feel like enough. It's been a few weeks now, and every time I drive that stretch of highway, I feel my heart race. I check my mirrors constantly, my eyes darting back and forth, expecting to see those figures again, or worse, to see that same man by the side of the road. I haven't heard anything more from the police. No updates. And every time I think about it, I can't help but wonder, what would have happened if I hadn't driven away that night? What if I hadn't made it out of there? I don't know. But I don't plan on finding out anytime soon. I'm telling you this story because I want people to be aware. Don't stop for anyone on desolate roads, especially in the dead of night. Because out there in the darkness, you never know who or what might be waiting for you. That's it for today's tale from Shivering Vault. If you have a story worth sharing, drop it in the comments or send it our way. Don't forget to subscribe and share with your fellow thrill seekers. As always, the Shivering Vault thanks you for unlocking today's tale. Until next time, the Vault awaits your return.